In the quiet, unassuming town of Hongben, located in China's Shaanxi province, an ordinary December morning in 2005 was about to be shattered by an act of unspeakable horror. The date was December 7th, and at the local kindergarten, the morning routine was in full swing. Teachers were expected to arrive by 6:30 a.m. to prepare classrooms and greet the arriving children. But on this particular morning, two sisters, beloved teachers at the school, were conspicuously absent. Their colleagues' repeated calls went unanswered, a silence that hinted at something far more sinister than a mere oversight. The school principal, a woman of deep concern for her staff, decided to take matters into her own hands. She dispatched another teacher to cover the sisters' class and, filled with a growing sense of unease, personally set off for their home. The sisters, Tu Hu and Tu Mai, lived together in Hongben, not far from the school, and were known for their gentle nature and impeccable conduct. As the principal walked, a chilling premonition settled over her. She called out their names upon reaching the house, but only an eerie silence greeted her. Strangely, the front door was ajar, suggesting someone was inside, yet no one responded, an unsettling riddle. Pushing the door open, the principal was immediately assailed by a sickening, metallic odor that sent shivers down her spine. The morning light, now flooding the entryway, revealed a horrifying sight: dark, viscous stains of blood smeared across the floor. A scream tore from her throat as she bolted outside, frantically calling for help from the startled neighbors. What they discovered inside defied comprehension. The two sisters lay dead, their bodies bearing testament to a brutal assault. The Hongben Town Public Security Bureau was immediately notified, and within minutes, police swarmed the scene, cordoning off the house and beginning their grim investigation. The victims were identified as Tu Hu and Tu Mai, both kindergarten teachers. But the horror deepened. As officers meticulously searched the house, they made another devastating discovery: the lifeless body of a little girl, barely 3 or 4 years old. Neighbors quickly recognized her as Tu Hu's daughter. A family of 3, brutally massacred. The scene was a bloodbath. The floor was drenched in crimson, the air thick with the smell of death. Tu Hu lay face down, her head towards the east, her limbs bound tightly with white nylon ropes. It appeared the killers had forced her into this position to ensure her subjugation. A 10 cm knife wound on her neck, severing the external carotid artery, had caused a massive hemorrhage, forming a large pool of blood on the floor. This fatal injury had claimed her life within approximately 3 minutes. Her sister, Tu Mai, was found in a similar gruesome state in the western bedroom, her hands and feet also bound with nylon rope, a deep gash across her throat. Disturbingly, the assailant had repeatedly slashed her neck with the knife, leaving multiple overlapping wounds. The swiftness of her death suggested a decisive, brutal attack. Bloodstains tracked from the living room into the western bedroom, indicating that the sisters were likely subdued in the living room. Tu Hu killed first, and then Tu Mai dragged into the bedroom for her horrific demise. Little Tu Hu's daughter met the same tragic fate. The investigators, hardened by years of confronting depravity, were moved to tears by the sight. The 4-year-old had been killed in a similar manner to her mother and aunt, though her limbs were not bound. The terror of her final moments was etched upon her face, her eyes wide with a haunting, resentful stare. Forensic analysis estimated the victims had died 12 to 14 hours prior, placing the time of the murders between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. on December 6. The fact that all 3 victims were fully clothed, some even still wearing their shoes, suggested they had just returned home when ambushed by the hidden assailants. School records corroborated this, showing Tu Hu had left work early on December 6 at 5 p.m. with her daughter, while Tu Mai finished at 6 p.m. The next morning, their absence and the subsequent discovery by the principal confirmed the timeline. The police concluded that the perpetrators had infiltrated the house, waited for Tu Hu and her daughter to return, murdered them, and then killed Tu Mai when she arrived home unexpectedly. What was the motive behind such a heinous crime? The answer emerged during the meticulous scene examination. The house had been ransacked, every concealed nook and cranny searched. Robbery was the clear motive. The killers had stolen Tu Hu's mobile phone but left Tu Mai's behind, its screen cracked, likely from a struggle during the attack. 3 bloody shoe prints were found on the living room floor. Experts quickly identified them as handmade cloth shoes and rubber-soled Bata shoes. These crucial pieces of evidence were sent to the Criminal Technical Department for analysis. Technicians determined they belonged to 3 different adult men, suggesting a group of professional robbers who had meticulously planned their crime. The lack of any commotion during the murders further supported this, as neighbors heard nothing amiss. Further investigation revealed blood-stained fingerprints on the north bedroom wall. In another bedroom, a white glove was found. The victim's relatives confirmed that neither the glove nor the white nylon ropes had ever been in Tu Hu's home, indicating they were brought by the perpetrators. The absence of forced entry on the main door led police to 2 theories: either the killers tailed Tu Hu, slipping in unnoticed when she opened the door, or they were acquaintances, perhaps friends, or even family members, who entered under the guise of a visit before overpowering and murdering the victims. Considering the victims' social lives, both Tu Hu and Tu Mai were described by neighbors as kind and gentle, exemplary teachers beloved by students and parents alike. Tu Hu had even received an award for her outstanding work from the Provincial Education Department. Tu Hu's husband worked in another province with a good income, and Tu Mai had moved in with them after marriage to provide companionship. This information quickly ruled out revenge or emotional motives for the murders. The police suspected the assailants targeted Tu Hu due to her perceived prosperity. Initially, they may have only intended to rob, but fear of exposure likely led them to eliminate all witnesses. However, the investigation quickly hit a wall. There were no witnesses in the vicinity of the victim's house at the time of the crime, and in 2005, security cameras were non-existent in Hongben. The only tangible clues were the fingerprints and shoe prints. Yet, in 2005, a national civilian database for fingerprints was still a distant dream, preventing any immediate comparisons. What would be a simple task today became an insurmountable obstacle. The task force could only send official requests with the collected fingerprints to neighboring police departments, hoping for a match with known criminals or suspects. All efforts proved fruitless. Of the 3 suspicious shoe prints, only one, from a handmade cloth shoe, was clear and intact, measuring about 27 centimeters. This led police to speculate the perpetrator was over 20 years old, approximately 1.7 meters tall, and weighed between 65 to 70 kilograms. Unfortunately, such footwear was common among manual laborers, making it a very general clue. A peculiar detail emerged regarding how the victims were bound. The technique, known locally as pig tying, was typically used by livestock traders for transporting animals. Combining all the available information, the police began to form a profile. The perpetrators were likely local, impoverished manual laborers who wore cloth shoes. One of them might have experience in animal husbandry or livestock trading. The investigation then pivoted to Tu Hu's stolen mobile phone, a valuable item at the time, not widely used by the general public. Could this lead to a breakthrough? Investigators immediately coordinated with the Hongben Telecommunications Company to examine the call history of Tu Hu's number. The initial review revealed nothing unusual. She only contacted colleagues and her husband. However, a critical detail emerged. At 9 p.m., after the estimated time of death, 3 calls were made to Tu Hu's phone by a parent seeking to excuse their child from school the next day. Telecommunication records indicated the phone had picked up a signal from a BTS tower in the southeastern area, approximately 6 kilometers from the crime scene. This strongly suggested one of the three perpetrators had taken the phone and moved to that area, likely residing there. However, this single BTS tower covered 3 towns and over a dozen villages, encompassing a population exceeding 10,000 people. Even with narrowed criteria, the suspect pool remained in the thousands. Despite the daunting task, with no other leads, the police were determined to explore this avenue. Days after the crime, persistent investigation yielded the first glimmer of hope. A man named Quach Ton Bu, whose characteristics closely matched the suspect profile, came into focus. At 32 years old, Quach Ton Bu stood 1.68 meters tall and possessed a robust physique. He worked as a cargo handler in Hongben, near the crime scene, and frequently engaged in handmade weaving during his free time. Further inquiry into his background revealed he had previously worked on a pig farm, making him proficient in slaughtering pigs. Adding to the suspicion, Quach Ton Bu was distantly related to the 2 victim sisters, meaning he was likely well acquainted with their family. When police visited Quach Ton Bu, he appeared remarkably calm and cooperative, readily answering all questions. He claimed to have been working near the crime scene on the day of the murders, with numerous colleagues to vouch for his continuous presence. However, while some colleagues confirmed his presence, others admitted they hadn't paid close attention to him, leaving a crucial gap in his alibi. Quach Ton Bu's dire financial situation also fueled suspicion, as police believed it could be a strong motive for the crime. Furthermore, the handmade cloth shoes he typically wore were identical to some found at the crime scene. Interestingly, when police approached him, he was wearing a brand new pair of the same type of shoes. This was unusual for someone in his financial situation, as manual laborers typically replaced shoes only when absolutely necessary. A search of Quach Ton Bu's home yielded no sign of his old shoes. When questioned, he reacted vehemently, angrily demanding why he was being suspected simply because his shoes resembled those worn by thousands of others, arguing that buying new shoes and discarding old ones was perfectly normal. His outburst left investigators momentarily flustered. His points held some truth, as their evidence was based solely on suspicion and inference, lacking concrete proof. They urged him to cooperate, assuring him that if he had done nothing wrong, there was no reason to fear. To verify his innocence, Quach Ton Bu's fingerprints were taken and compared with those found at the crime scene. The results were inconclusive. There was no match. Yet, he remained a primary suspect. The presence of 3 assailants meant his fingerprints not being at the scene didn't automatically clear him. Despite the lingering suspicion, concrete evidence was needed for an indictment. Thus, he was placed under special surveillance to monitor his movements. The focus shifted to the physical evidence from the crime scene, the glove and the nylon ropes used to bind the victims. These were common items, sold in numerous stores. Despite canvassing dozens of stores, police found no useful information. Small shops rarely kept customer records, and the sheer volume of daily customers made it impossible for owners to remember everyone. After more than 2 months, the task force had narrowed down thousands of suspects in the area and sent fingerprint samples to neighboring police departments for assistance, but still, no progress. The investigation had reached a dead end. Police began to consider the possibility that the perpetrators were not local or had fled elsewhere. To explore this, the task force concentrated on individuals who had temporarily resided in Hongben around the time of the murders. Soon, a new lead emerged. Residency records showed 3 young men from Hunan province had abruptly left Hongben on December 7, 2005. They had registered for temporary residence a month before the murders and rented a guest house not far from the crime scene. According to guest house staff, the 3 men were around 25 to 26 years old, approximately 1.7 meters tall, and robust. More importantly, they were unkempt, kept late hours, and occasionally carried unidentified objects. They had left their driver's licenses when registering but didn't bother to retrieve them when they left. They had also tried to rent 3 bicycles for 300 yuan before vanishing without a trace. Their unusually suspicious behavior had left a lasting impression on those around them. Had they fled in such a hurry due to nefarious activities? Using the information on the driver's license, police collaborated with the Jia Shu Wende department to locate the owner, a man named Tru Tu Nam, residing in Nanyang, Hunan province. The task force immediately traveled to Hunan to meet him. Tru Tu Nam stated that his wallet and documents had been stolen over 2 months prior while at the market. Since he hadn't yet replaced his identification, he hadn't dared to leave his hometown during that period. Verification confirmed his story. Tru Tu Nam indeed had an ironclad alibi. Who then were the 3 men in Hongben using his driver's license? The motive for the crime might have been opportunistic. But how did the perpetrators know so much about the victim's circumstances and gain easy access to their home? This brought the police back to their initial assessment: the suspects had to be local. More than 6 months had passed since the murders. Despite countless efforts, the task force remained empty-handed. A horrific crime remained unsolved in their jurisdiction, causing public fear and concern. The police were more determined than ever to apprehend the brutal killers. A year later, a new lead emerged. A man named Lu Tangdong had recently returned to Hongben. His residency records indicated he had worked in Hongben before the murders but returned to his hometown of Timbak after December 7. Crucially, his physical characteristics closely matched the suspect profile. He frequently wore cloth shoes and often frequented a mahjong parlor near the victim's home. Police theorized that Lu Tangdong had been lingering near the crime scene before the murders, providing him with the opportunity. Perhaps during his gambling sessions, he had overheard conversations about the victim's family. Driven by his own financial desperation, he might have planned the murder.